you so much, Tracy and Mary. It's been a real pleasure just getting to know the two of you through this process a little bit, and I'm excited to be here with all of you. So I'll share a little bit more about myself a little further in the presentation. So we'll just kind of move through. Obviously, as we've already said, we're here for slowing down for metadata justice. I think we're here for slowing down in general. This presentation was originally given in New York last, I think, November at the ACRL New York event. And I have if you were there, I have updated things a little bit, but it's mostly the same presentation on learning to trust our bodies and ourselves. So I am Bailey Hoffner, metadata librarian for Oklahoma State University. I work completely remotely, though, from Norman, Oklahoma. So for anyone that knows anything about Oklahoma, I'm in Sooner territory, happily no longer working for that institution, and I work instead for our rival in Stillwater. On that, quick acknowledgement. I'm definitely here thanks to Oklahoma State University Library, but these are my opinions and don't necessarily reflect the opinions or beliefs of my institution. Quick agenda, so we kind of know where we're headed in the next 40-ish minutes. We're going to do a check-in together and actively practice slowing down right here in the middle of our day. I'll do a little about me after that to give some context for my being here today. Talk specifically about metadata justice efforts in Oklahoma over the last few years. And then we'll get into kind of the meat of the program, if you will, the sustainable embodied approach to this kind of work and some tips for that. We'll also look at a couple of examples of what that looks like in practice or can look like in practice, and then leave with kind of some next steps to hopefully energize ourselves forward after this. So the first thing that we're going to do, like I said, is do a little check-in. So the question here, how are you feeling right now? Feel free to interpret this question however you like. You don't need to tell anyone, but I do encourage you to kind of try to tune in, again, in the middle of your workday, in the middle of a professional development event. Try to tune in a little bit to what your physical body is feeling right now. And then just maybe write down a few words or just hold those words in your mind. And I'm going to do the same thing with you for a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds. If it feels uncomfortable for you, just know that we're vulnerable here together. And it's not often that we take time to check in with ourselves and what our bodies might be telling us. So we'll go ahead and just paying attention to what our bodies might be telling us about how we feel. So I definitely found, excitement feels incredibly similar to anxiety in our bodies. And I know I'm excited to be here talking with you all. And probably also a bit anxious. I can recognize anytime we get up and speak in front of people. So there was sort of a heightened constriction for me that I definitely wasn't tuned into before doing that. If you do want to share anything about what you were feeling, feel free in the chat, but no pressure whatsoever. So when we start to think about the work of metadata justice, it's really natural, if we're thinking about how we feel in our bodies, to feel a sense of urgency, right? Probably similar to that kind of heightened constriction that I was just noticing in myself. And there are good reasons for that, right? The problems are enormous. They continue to grow and change. Our work or our denial affects real people. Those things are very true. And there are decades of backburnered work, that things that we all know we'd like to work on. Maybe if you work in special collections, you really want to revisit all of those descriptions written in the 1940s or 60s, just to try to tune into ways in which bias may have been built into those descriptions, as opposed to what's actually there in the photograph, or just paying more attention. There's always so much to do. So I know I already asked us to probably somewhat uncomfortably slow down and have a bit of silence. We're not going to have silence, but we are going to continue to try to slow down. We're going to try to notice that sense of urgency and continue to kind of refuse it. Yes, it's there. All of these things are true. And yet, it's really important that we slow down and take a more embodied and sustainable approach to this work. So I'm going to read a few quotes that we can kind of contemplate in our efforts to continue slowing down. We will slow down. If you are a tree, slow growth is the key to growing old. Growth fueled by hefty additions of excess nitrogen from agricultural operations is unhealthy. That's from Peter Wohlleben, The Secret Life of Trees. And while we're not trees, I think there's quite a bit we can learn from that. We will slow down. It's supremely unhealthy for both individuals and organizations to try to be in bloom all the time. Perhaps if we reject the capitalist drive to constantly churn out new products and instead take a stand to support more reflective and responsive practices, we can offer our patrons services that are deeper, more lasting, and more human. That is from Julia Glassman's article, which inspired the ACRL New York event in last fall, The Innovation Fetish and Slow Librarianship. We will slow down. Our collective resting, coordinated with deep traveling within our hearts, begins the process of dismantling capitalism, white supremacy, racism, homophobia, ableism, and patriarchy. There is no rush. There is no urgency. Unravel from the lies of white supremacy culture. Rest is a meticulous love practice. Rest is a meticulous love practice. That, of course, is from Tricia Hersey, founder of the Nat Ministry, in her book, Rest is Resistance. So I want to go ahead and do that check-in again. And we're going to do another minute, whole minute. Think about how you feel within your body. Same, different. Maybe you couldn't pinpoint anything before, but now you might be able to. Let's take 1 minute and just tune in. Okay, that was about 1 minute. So again, if y'all are interested in sharing anything in the chat, feel free. Know that however you're feeling on either side of this is completely valid. I'm feeling that, yay, we all just practiced already taking a more embodied approach to both life and this work. So thank you for doing that with me. A little more about me. I think I'm still 36. I think I turned 37 this month. I'm a writer, artist, mother, metadata librarian. I am a white woman, as those of you that can see me can see. I am also an adult diagnosed PDA autistic woman. And I've been directly involved in metadata justice efforts in Oklahoma since 2020. So I share all of this as a sort of positionality, attempt at positionality to show you the ways at which I'm coming at this work. And specifically, why I mentioned being autistic is that what we just did was really necessary for me to be able to present to you today in a healthy way. Because that was not scripted when I told you that I suddenly realized I had this very tense, restricted feeling of anxiety. It's actually really important for me to try to tune in. That sustainable embodied approach is essential for my having any access to wellness, which is truly a new experience for me post-diagnosis. I also don't like to miss any opportunities to spread awareness about autism and or PDA, though I won't be getting into a lot of details today. Please feel free to reach out if you have more questions. So some recent metadata justice efforts in Oklahoma, things that I have either been involved with or been aware of that my colleagues have been doing. Just going to do a quick rundown of a few. So for me, this work started in 2020, early 2020, with a couple of colleagues who, and a boss who was very supportive of this work. My boss actually pointed out that the Tulsa Race Massacre Library of Congress subject heading was still listed as Tulsa Race Riots and had actually been recently reviewed and re-upped with the term riot rather than massacre. And living in Oklahoma, I think and hope that most people are aware of the Tulsa Race Massacre at this point. But if not, that's okay. We're all still doing our best to learn. But in Oklahoma, we've been pretty tuned into it, and there has been a massive and rapid shift in language usage, and there had been in 2020 to where we had really generally shifted to the community's preference of using the term massacre. Also, it's more historically accurate, all sorts of reasons. So we started working on that in 2020. We wanted, none of us, the three of us were not catalogers, but we did have a colleague who was a cataloger who had the appropriate SACO role permissions to be able to submit subject heading change proposals. And so we started building out kind of a collaborative effort to change that, to propose a change to that heading. We'll look at the timeline on that specific one a little bit later. But that was where the work started. Then in 2021, the heading was accepted, I think late in the year. It didn't actually sort of go live until sometime in 2022. We also at that time formed the Learning and Working Group on Metadata Justice at my prior institution, University of Oklahoma. And that is where we formed the document that I will make sure you have a link to, and I'll kind of explain how to get to it shortly. That is a further build out of kind of building a foundation for this kind of metadata justice work in a sustainable way. We formed that group and continued to take on projects in that area. In 2022, our colleagues at the University of Central Oklahoma had held the first Metadata Justice in Oklahoma Library and Archive Symposium. And we just had the third one recently this year. 2022 was also when we had the very first workshop put on by Richard Sapon-White and Sarah Levinson on creating Library of Congress subject headings for Indigenous topics, out of which came a really great manual and guidelines on how to do that in a culturally sensitive way, which I'll also may have already been shared in the chat. Then in 2023, we did get some new Library of Congress subject headings for Indigenous topics that came out of that amazing workshop. And I say we, the workshop attendees. And then also my current boss and colleague at OSU worked with some others on the Tribal Nations of Oklahoma metadata database, which is a place where everyone can easily go to refer and find at least what the various tribes in Oklahoma prefer to call themselves based on their websites, so that every librarian isn't constantly poking them about things. So we have one kind of place where we can have that information. Then, like I said, this year we had the University of Central Oklahoma had the third Metadata Justice Symposium. And during that, another colleague of mine, Rebecca Silverstein, presented Unraveling Metadata Justice, which is a timeline that's just fabulous of critical cataloging and metadata justice efforts over time. So those are linked there. And of the links that were shared in the chat, they're all obviously available here in the slides for when you get those later, there'll be hyperlinks. And the one here, the Metadata Justice in Oklahoma Libraries and Archive Symposium Proceedings, that'll get you to pretty much all the other things or some presentation on these various different topics. Okay, so we're going to move into talking about components of a sustainable embodied approach. Before we get into some of the kind of three main components of a sustainable embodied approach, I just wanted to mention this idea of spending a little time constructing a value-based foundation for yourself, whether you're actually building out a document or even just on an individual level, some of the things to think through in doing this work. I did a presentation at the UCO symposium in 2023, and that is linked here, or you can find it through that preceding site. And it includes a guiding principles example document, which is what this is kind of the beginning of. It's a few pages, and it's not prescriptive in any way. It literally is just the example of the guiding principles document and approach to work that the group at OU worked on together to build out. And I think it's got just some really great things to reference when thinking about this work. So I wanted to make sure and mention that. You don't need to look at it right now while we're doing this, and we're not going to dig into every bit of it today, but that is there if you want to dig in a little further. Okay, so this is a big one. Progress without pressure was one of our key components and principles for our work. And so I want to talk with each of these three things, really focus in on what makes these things both more sustainable and embodied. So I'll speak specifically about that group, the Metadata Justice group at OU. We wanted to be really clear that we would be moving in respect to the wisdom of our bodies, right? Especially during 2020 to 2022 and continued now as COVID becomes a more continual presence in our lives. Really wanting to tune in and not create additional pressure. So we wanted to find a way to continue to move forward, but not create additional pressure. All of us that joined this group from various different parts of the library did it because we wanted to, not because we had extra time. And so it was really important to us that we did things like, for example, one of the key things written in that document was, we will prioritize the mental and emotional health of group members above productivity and progress. Quote, non-productive time is just as important as time spent actively engaged in work. And so there's something that happens when you sort of go through the ritual of actually documenting something. This was just for our group, right? It didn't mean that we were changing the policies of the department or the university in any way, but for ourselves and how we wanted to treat ourselves and one another in this work, it was really important. I like to think of this approach as more like a positive image of a carrot on a stick, right? Like we would have something that we were excited about, and if we were excited about it and wanted to work on it, we could follow that, right? That would energize us, rather than sort of that sense of urgency chasing us. Like the stick is chasing after you. Instead, the stick is holding a carrot that is helping to lead you where you're wanting to go. So it's not a perfect image, but yeah, progress without pressure was super, super important for us. So that often meant if somebody got sick, and we all did at various times, and they were in charge of something, we had mechanisms in place to make sure, like, okay, the most important thing is they take care of themselves. And so we're going to assess, does somebody need to take over this piece? Who's going to do it? If nobody's available, we're going to set it aside for now. Just having that written in really helped reduce pressure, I think, for all of us. And that, of course, then helped make it more sustainable, especially during a time when we were all pretty worn out. Similar here, these are all kind of interconnected. Shared labor. So obviously more sustainable than doing it all yourself. The thing that one of the big things that we did that's built into that document, again, I actually learned from social justice work, which I think got pulled from like economics or something. I don't know, but I really like it. And it's this idea of bottom lining or anchoring. So rather than a hierarchical leadership structure where there's a person that sort of gets credit, which is often what you see in academia and academic librarianship, there's this like competition thing happening. We really didn't want that. And so a bottom lining or anchoring approach, there's not that hierarchy, but there's someone who commits to being in charge of a particular thing. And so in our group, we set up multiple membership levels and multiple responsibility levels so that people could even participate just by being an affiliate member and mainly just stay tuned in. Like that's what they could commit to, was of the learning and working group, they could commit to the learning, right? And that was awesome. We were excited to have anybody that wanted to do that as well. But like for myself, I bottom lined for the whole group. So what that meant was making sure we had meetings scheduled, making sure I followed up about action items, making sure we stuck to our the principles we'd committed to, etc. It also allowed us to acknowledge the contributions that everyone brought and could bring. So we had one person who really wanted to participate, but had no way, couldn't be there, couldn't commit to anything outside of the actual meetings. They also happened to be someone who was really good at taking meeting notes. And so they were our note taker, and they were happy to do that and be able to contribute in that way. So shared labor, finding ways to spread it out rather than trying to do it all ourselves. And then non-punitive. I feel really strongly that punishment has no place in this work, in social justice work more broadly, but certainly in metadata justice work. And I do think that if we listen to the wisdom of our bodies, that's what they will tell us. So we had built into our document a non-punitive grievance process. And that was important for us because we built into that the idea of call-ins as opposed to call-outs, so that we could maintain a sense of mutual respect among one another, knowing we all had good intentions being there, but that we're not all going to have the same knowledge, and we're going to mess up sometimes. People are going to mess up sometimes. But call-ins, rather than call-outs, encourage growth rather than shame. And so I want to invite everybody one more time to do a little feeling in your bodies. This has been a lot of feeling stuff today, I know. But think, even just for a moment, think of the way that shame feels in your body. And I don't want to make you do it very long because that could even be triggering for people, but just, yeah, it's pretty yucky and constricting, I think. I don't think we need to do that for long. And then think of the way that you feel when someone kindly helps you learn something new. And so looking at those two things, then think about which of those has better fostered learning and growth for you personally. I think this is really, really important on obviously from an embodied approach. If we pay attention to what our bodies are telling us, it's pretty clear. And also a sustainability approach. I've seen a lot of work in social justice, whether it's in libraries or elsewhere, where there's a commitment to things like transformative justice and non-punitive approaches to conflict resolution. And even with that commitment, really punitive things end up acted out still. I saw it very recently, even in small spaces where we kind of have a sense that everybody's at least here with good intentions, and that's a starting point. It doesn't mean that I think there is a place for call outs in a broader, but I think within these groups where we're all coming together and wanting to learn, there is a way to do this work without shame, without using shame as a sort of bludgeon. So I do think that's quite important. And that non-punitive approach applies to you as well, right? Even if you're only doing the work yourself, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So what does this look like in practice? We're going to look at two different examples here. So the first one I also already mentioned, the Tulsa Race Massacre. I apologize, one of these, whoops, isn't showing up. That image just shows the timeline between when the heading was updated in 2019 and when it was updated again in 2022, and gives a sense of just how much time it can take to do this work. Even if you're a cataloger just burning through a subject heading that doesn't necessarily have a bunch of cultural significance or potential for harm, it still takes time to move through the SACO process. For us, it took even more time because we really, really, really wanted to stick to those principles we'd committed to. So progress without pressure, right? We started work in early 2020, and the revision was finally applied mid-2022. So we definitely took breaks when we needed to. You'll notice here this is the listing of the subject heading itself towards the top, and then there are some of the sources that we used. That top one, the Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission. I won't get too into the nitty-gritty, but when you're doing subject heading proposals, the main thing they're looking for is common American usage. So we could spend a long time talking about what exactly that might mean, especially when you're dealing with race. But it was important to us that we include, regardless of whether or not they were the sources that were going to be the most relevant to our being successful, which we also included. We wanted to make sure we included the community themselves, so representatives of the community themselves. We have the Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission in there and their website, which is actually their logo is, I think it used to say Tulsa Race Riot Commission, and they have riot like marked out. So it's very clear, like this is a change that has happened to language usage. Additionally, when we think about shared labor, not only was this a multi-unit collaborative team, we also, as almost as predominantly, trying to think back to that exact proposal, predominantly, if not all, white librarians working on this, it was really, really important for us to engage directly with members and representatives of the Black community in Tulsa, regardless of if we thought, well, we definitely know. And so one of our members had a direct and regular communication line open with the Greenwood Cultural Center as well to make sure that everything that we were doing was in line with what they wanted. We also took a long break before submitting to make sure we had a letter from them. That because it just was really, we thought it was really, really important, right? It's really important. We didn't need to rush this. We needed to do it right. And then finally, there definitely were disagreements when we got into the nitty-gritty of how exactly the technical part of working on a proposal should go versus kind of our principles and the reasons why we wanted to do this work. But we didn't punish one another for what we didn't yet know, right? If we needed to take space from one another, we did. And we definitely continued to take a non-punitive approach in working to educate one another. This other example is, so that was like obviously group work. This is more individual. So this was my heading for the workshop in Muskogee. Was it in Muskogee? It was in Okmulgee, Oklahoma, but it was at, I think, Muskogee College. I apologize, the words have left me, but Lasik Indians, this was a tribe in Northern California, and there is definite documentation, lots of writing. There's plenty at UC Berkeley in the Bancroft Library, and some oral histories from Lucy Young here are kind of the source of the majority of those materials. This tribe was actually predominantly, we talk a lot about like, especially here in Oklahoma, tribes are active and alive. And this particular tribe was small and was almost completely wiped out, with Lucy Young being the only known survivor by the time she died. So it was a really interesting one to try to create a subject heading, because there wasn't a subject heading, but there was obviously material specifically related to this tribe and a justification for creating the term. So progress without pressure. I took my time. I worked hard to refuse the narrative of time scarcity, and I read everything that I could find. I read everything I could find. I allowed myself a couple days that I just fell into the literature, and that meant putting other projects that were maybe more pressing to the side. But this felt really important, and I didn't pursue the change proposal until I felt confident I'd learned all that I could, short of traveling to UC Berkeley and listening to those oral histories, which I'd still like to do someday. Shared labor, I was working with some experts that work on these kinds of things all the time, with Sarah Levinson and the Latin American and Indigenous Peoples of the America, or LIPA funnel, and Richard Sapon-White, who led the workshop on Indigenous subject headings. And non-punitive, like I said, right? Even if it's just you, I didn't punish myself. We do this a lot. I didn't punish myself for spending my time and attention learning all that I could about Lucy Young and her tribe. When I could have gotten it up, I could have gotten an updated proposal ready more quickly. In fact, I did the opposite, and I felt that it was really important to spend my time and attention with those I hoped to directly honor in my work. So this definitely goes against that churn, that urge to just churn stuff out, but it did feel really important. The where this is at right now, I mentioned that some of those new headings went through and some didn't. Mine came back through Sarah Levinson, and they said, we really need, so this is funny. This is kind of how we're in this moment where people are really trying to do things better. And so Library of Congress came back. And I hope I don't get this wrong, because again, I'm not a cataloger. Either SACO officials or Library of Congress, somebody came back and said, we really need you to reach out to someone in the tribe or someone that can represent the tribe to get their input, which is like, that is such a great, yes, let's do that. But if it's, if we literally don't know, there's one line I found in something that some of Lucy Young's descendants still live in that area. So with that, short of going and knocking on doors, which seems pretty intrusive, it just was, I felt that Lucy herself, though she was not still alive, was clearly the best representative. She gave lots of reasoning. It was understood that Lasik was the name of a chief, and that it was a specific tribal group that had split off. So there was lots of evidence for why that would be the appropriate term. But sometimes in trying to do this work well, yes, we should absolutely find out from the people who are being represented if that's right. But if we can't, then what do we do? And the answer right now is my proposal seems still to be in limbo. But we'll keep going, and maybe I will head out to UC Berkeley at some point. Okay, to wrap things up, I did want to just put this question forward. How after today, how do you feel like you could take one small step to slow down in this work? And know that when I say that, it doesn't have to be, I'm going to submit a Library of Congress subject heading proposal, or I'm going to work to dismantle the entire system of Library of Congress subject heading, whatever. It doesn't actually have to be that. It could be that you're going to honor your need to tend to the part of your brain that's creative by drawing for 20 minutes at work. That could be something you could do to slow down in a way that feeds you and gives you energy for this work. Maybe it's falling into deep research on people that you hope to honor through your work. Even just taking a walk outside because that's what your body is trying to tell you it needs right then. I think all of these things are very interconnected. But what might you do to start slowing down? I have a couple other references that are linked here in the slides. Some of these we've talked about. And yeah, just thank you all very much for sharing your time and attention with me.